On today's episode of Speak Shame with Dr. Connie Kerali.
I really felt like I was imprisoned in my mind prior to even walking through the incarceration doors. So for me, walking out through the gates, the first thing I felt was shame. And I wore that badge of shame for many months to come. We have to be aware of what we're thinking, of what we're saying to ourselves, how we act to ourselves. If you take anything from my story, please take that you have to prioritize you first.
Hello, remarkable woman. I'm your host, Dr. Connie Kerali, medical doctor, life coach, and survivor of sexual violence. And you're listening to Speak Shame, a collection of inspiring conversations with remarkable women who have faced and overcome adversity. By sharing their stories, my hope is that you may find strength, connection, and hope in your own journey, and that shame itself loses its power. So sit back, relax, and don't forget to follow the show. So joining me on this week's episode is the wonderful Nichole Banks, the divorce recovery coach and host of the Nichole Banks Podcast, which is the go-to spot for healing, heartache, and happiness after divorce, is here to share her story, and I'm so grateful to have her with me today. Thank you so much for joining me, Nichole. How are you?
Oh my goodness, thank you for having me. I am not only thrilled, but also honored.
Thank you so much for coming. And I always like to kind of kick off the show with a kind of tell me about yourself question, but without actually being tell me about yourself. So what I'm going to ask you is, if your life story was turned into a book, describe for me what happens in chapter 1.
I love this question. Wow. I think chapter 1, can I share this with you that I actually have a book?
Oh, okay.
I have a book coming out in 2025, and
Amazing.
It's simply called How to Navigate Heartache, Healing, and Love After Divorce. And I'm going to share a little backstory. I don't know if you want the longer version, but I'm going to share a little backstory real quick. Basically, I wrote this book about my story, about the heartache and the devastation and the jealousy and the lack of confidence and the low self-worth. I wrote that story. And I wrote the things that I did, and I wrote the things that I should have done, and I just wrote it. Then about 1.5 years ago, I rewrote the whole book. And to answer your question, it's just more centered on not just my story, but really getting my message out to help other women heal from divorce. So when I look at what my first chapter was, I want women to open up the book and have immediate resources. I want them to be able to know they're not alone in the pain, in the anguish, and the devastation, in the canceled plans, in their future. They're not alone in that. And so my first chapter of the book happens to be real simple, easy steps on how to center yourself and an opportunity to heal. And then chapter 2 is my story. And then chapter 2, I talk about my story. But the reality is, if my life was a book, the first chapter is about the message, because I just want to serve the women to heal.
Yeah. Oh, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. And do you know what? I love that, because yes, the question was about you, but what you've realized is important is service to others. And I think that is so powerful. And we're really going to get into that. Yes, now I want to know about chapter 2, but what I want to know really is what led you from that start of your journey to where you are now with a book coming out. Tell me a little bit about your journey.
So I am twice divorced and happily in love, and have been for the last 10 years, to an amazing partner named Jeff. And I think if you've heard any of my show or any of my social media, I always refer, everybody needs a Jeff. He is kind and smart and witty and sexy and just, we get along beautifully. And I've never felt so supported in a relationship. Wow. He's just amazing. He is just one in a million. And my story basically began 15 years ago when I was going through my second divorce. And it was interesting because I said twice divorce. My first marriage was really put together because I was a single mom and I had pressure from my dad and pressure from the religion and pressure from my mother about finding a partner, a husband that could provide financially, materially for myself and my young daughter. And I came home one day and my dad said, "I found you a man." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" I didn't even know he was looking. And so this gentleman that I met and married within 3 months, because at one point we were going to get married the following summer, but then he says, "If we get married this year, it'll help save me on taxes." Okay. Walked down the aisle and I knew on my wedding day I should not have. I literally looked myself in the mirror, all dressed up in my homemade gown, stunning gown. Keep in mind, it's the 80s, so I have the bouffant hair and the shadow and all. I know, I was just hot. I knew I should not have walked down that aisle. But we met and married within 3 months and we were together 5 years. And the first year I just suffered so horribly because it wasn't what I wanted. And not that he wasn't a good guy. He was a good guy. He was a nice guy. He just wasn't mine. And so when I divorced him, it was my choice. And I divorced not only him, but the religion as well. So I grew up Jehovah's Witness and I was disfellowship. Then the second gentleman that I met, he was my pick. I got to choose, right?
Yes.
And great personality, company loyal, came with some baggage. So it was mysterious and that kind of fun relationship. And unfortunately, infidelity came into play on his part, not once, not twice, but over the 10 years we were together. And I was the person that kept sweeping everything under the rug, saying, "Oh, not a big deal." I mean, I'm sure this happens in other relationships, turning to self-help books. How do I get out of this? What do I need to say? What is my role in this? How am I participating in this? And I think that took a huge ego blow. My ego, just the self-worth, no boundaries. I really taught him how to treat me.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it continued. So once I went through my divorce, I ended up being devastated with infidelity once again. And I ended up isolating and cutting everyone off from the ones that were supporting. I also went through the loss of my dad, who was my, kindred spirit per se. He was the guy I looked for guidance to. And I lost him to pancreatic cancer that summer. No. And I found out my husband was cheating once again in October. Then the following year, my daughter, that was my daughter's senior year in high school as well. So I had a combination of things happening that I personally take full responsibility for, didn't want to address. I didn't. I wanted to just roll everything under the carpet. I just, again, became a hermit and just really didn't want to do anything. So at one point, I had been a financial bookkeeper for a nonprofit women's organization that I had been a bookkeeper for 7 years. I was the treasurer on their board for 7 years without missing anything, without missing a penny. All the T's were crossed, all the I's were dotted and everything. And at one point, I ended up embezzling money from them to keep my business afloat. And that's the only way I really knew how to solve the problem I was having. So isolation led to depression, led to self-loathing, extreme doubt, lack of confidence, all of the things. And realistically, Dr. Connie, I was in so much pain that I didn't know where or who to turn to.
Yeah.
So I look at everything and I go, my problem was really just not asking for help.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I ended up writing some checks to my business and trying to keep my business afloat, to keep my life afloat. And when I was caught, it was almost like the relief.
Yes.
And what happened was, the next thing that happened was, in my opinion, was true injustice. Number one, I had never been in trouble before. Number two, I had already returned half the money that I took. And I didn't know how to advocate. I was given a state attorney because I didn't have the money to fund my own attorney. Embarrassment came with that. Pride came with that. All of the ego bust, everything came with that. And I don't know if your listeners, for those who have done a crime, who have been under these pressures and turmoil per se, you need to know that I have never pointed the finger at anybody else. I've always been 100% accountable for my own actions. However, I was so naive to the justice system that when I walked into open sentencing court, no plea bargain, no let's negotiate, nothing, no ankle bracelet, no nothing. I ended up going to prison. I was sentenced to 54 months in prison for embezzling $23,000. And that's my story.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing your story, because I think so many listeners will be able to relate to this. You know, sometimes when things are going wrong in life, it can just be easier just to kind of, as you said, sweep things under the carpet, and it can just be one thing on top of another and top of another. And as you say, we all make mistakes in life, and recognizing our own kind of roles in them volumes about who you are as a person. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I wonder, really leading on from that, what that experience then meant for you, how your time was in prison, what happened afterwards.
Yeah.
What was kind of the things you took away?
So, of course, everything was stripped from me. And I mean, everything. The only thing that I held was my thoughts. They told me what to wear. They told me when to go to bed. They told me when to use the ladies' room. They told me when to eat, what to eat. I didn't get choices in anything.
Yeah.
If I ordered something off of the commissary, it was still a limited choice. So everything was stripped from me. My clothing, my support bras, all just your natural stuff that you sit there and you really take for granted, right? Your comfort of your own bed, your sheets, all of the things. The only thing that they could not take from me were my thoughts. And so, just to be real with you, I felt like the first 9 months of this incarceration, I was undercover, like Diane Sawyer or Barbara Walters or some investigative reporter. And one morning I woke up going, that reporter would not have been here this long. I think this is now my reality. I would play little mind tricks like that, if that made sense, because
Yes.
There's so much pain in those prisons. The women are just literally in emotional pain. And it isn't easy to walk around with negativity and depression and sadness and loneliness and all of those things. And so while I was in there, one of the things that it was a silver lining, was the judge offered me, it was called programs. And if you were offered programs, then basically that would be if you were in drug rehabilitation or cognitive thinking program or a parenting program, then if you completed that program, each program were 6 months long. If you completed that program, then you got an opportunity to cut your sentence. So I was sentenced 54 months. I got an opportunity to get into a cognitive thinking program. And then, of course, I was released 20 months, 16 days, and 5 hours later.
Wow.
And yeah, right before the holidays. And so for me, walking out through the gates, the first thing I felt was shame.
Yeah.
I let my family down. I let my daughter down. I let my community down. I let my peers down, and I let myself down. And I wore that badge of shame for many months to come, just because I didn't know. You're in a 20-month scheduling, when to wake up, what to wear, do all of this stuff. And then all of a sudden you get released into the world again, where there's bright color, there's amazing sound, there's flavor, all the things, right? You're just sensory overload, which I had a hard time dealing with, which you would never think, but I did. You run into people at the grocery store, or everybody knows that you're home, and you wait for the door to be knocking with your friends and your peers, your family, and it never knocked. No one ever knocked on my door to say, hey, welcome home, or how are you, or any of that. So I wore the badge of shame for a very long time.
Yes, yeah. And do you know what? I think I could just see just how deeply the emotions are there, just reminiscing on that. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think that it's so important as well to hear what it feels like to go from having everything stripped away from you to then having your freedom again. But then it's almost like, okay, well, who am I? What next? And I guess that is my next question for you. How did you navigate that time? What do you think were the steps that helped you go forward?
It really was. I really held tight to the things that I could control. And I really had to be open-minded. So again, mindset, had to really be open-minded to accepting or adjusting to the things I couldn't control. So for example, the first thing I wanted to do was get back into the employment, and looking for work. One of the first questions they ask you is, are you a felon? I had to answer the question with a yes, with a checkbox, just yes, I am a felon. But I was trying to control my thoughts and spin it to the positive and be able to understand that, listen, I made a mistake. I served my time. I'm paying my restitution. I'm doing the things in which I'm supposed to be doing. I've never been in trouble prior to that. I never been in trouble since that. And I had to look back and really just look back and go, wow, where did it all start? Again, it started with me not asking for help. It started with, the negative mindset of doubt. And I was trying to rewrite my thoughts and challenge my thoughts. It's like, you're scum. I kept saying you're scum. And one morning I woke up going, you know what scum is? Scum is like at the bottom of your sink. It's just dirty, nasty, slimy. Scum is like at the bottom of a rotten fruit. Scum is just gross. I'm not gross. I made a mistake. And so I started challenging that negativity, because self-talk we listen to it. It's the craziest thing, but we start listening to it. And as a coach, it's one of those things where I look at it's the awareness. We have to be aware of what we're thinking, of what we're saying to ourselves, how we act to ourselves. It's so crazy because I know so many of us women will treat our best friend like royalty, but won't treat ourselves like royalty. Now, don't get me wrong. I came out of prison. I did not think I was royal. Okay. I continued to challenge the thoughts, because at one point I just got done saying I thought I was scum, and I knew I wasn't. So I started working on myself. What started this? What triggered it? How do I reframe my way of thinking so I don't go back into the isolation? So, prior to this, I knew I did the crime, but I would be drinking a lot of wine. I would be gambling a lot. And both of those vices are numbing vices, right? And you numb out. You don't want to face your fear. You don't want to face reality. You don't want to face the accountability of your actions. So once you start challenging your negativity, your negative thoughts, you have to replace it with something. And like I said, it doesn't mean it has to be of royalty. Oh, Yes, my lady. But it's none of that. But what it is, it's I am better than this. I can do better than this. I am doing better than this. So I started doing positive affirmations, started to journal. I journaled in prison and just dumped out my thoughts. I got better sleep. I started taking better care of myself, taking care of my face, taking care of my physical well-being, getting physical exercise that helped with mental clarity. I just took the steps about me. I prioritized me. And slowly but surely, my confidence started coming back. My shame had lessened. And I did a lot of groundwork around shame, what that looked like, why I didn't use my voice, why I didn't say I need help, all of those things. And it's interesting because, to make a very long story short, it is about you.
Yeah.
If the listeners are listening, excuse me, if the listeners are listening and you're in this position, I want you to remember, if you take everything else out of the equation, what do you have left? Yourself. It doesn't matter the circumstance, it matters about you. And once you prioritize and spend the energy on healing you, the world, the community, the everyday living, the stress load is so much lighter. It's amazing. So if you take anything from my story, please take that you have to prioritize you first.
Nichole, thank you. And I think so many people, I hope they're making notes, are going to get so many just the words of wisdom from that, because not only did you talk about how your thoughts weren't serving you, but also the actions that you took, positive affirmations, exercise for mental clarity, just all these little things, rolled into one over time, as you said, started to help reduce the shame. And I think it's a great example and so inspiring. And I guess the other thing that probably listeners want to know is, were there any tools that you were using? Was this something that you learned from the time when you were doing the course in prison? How did you kind of know, or was it more instinctive, these changes?
Yeah, I felt so. Again, prison life is everything is stripped from you. So you look like everybody else. You're wearing the same clothes. You have the same haircut. I mean, you're eating the same food. Realistically, there's not a lot of variety. And so the one thing I did do is I started working out in there, and I started journaling and just letting every thought come out. When you're in prison, and I really felt like I was imprisoned in my mind prior to even walking through the incarceration doors. I was stuck. I didn't have the key to open up the lock. I didn't know how, I didn't know what. I had a lot of fear. I could not overcome the things that I were dealing with, the infidelity, the loss of my dad, becoming an empty nester. Where do I go now? Who am I? And so I started journaling and asking these questions and making them thought-provoking. And I continued to do that. I would set my timer on my little watch in prison, and I would write for 10 minutes. And sometimes it was just a word, like love. And I couldn't write anything about love. That's what the word was. And other times I wrote 3 pages within 10 minutes, just just vomit of writing. And so I continue to do that today. And it is an opportunity that's freeing. It's for yourself. And It's so healing. It's emotionally healing because you're letting it out. And I just feel like I said, I swept everything under the carpet. And realistically, if you visualize sweeping something under the carpet, you're literally physically picking up the rug, throwing something under the carpet, putting the carpet over it. It's nothing but a lump in your carpet. And the crazy thing about it is that when you lift that carpet up, guess what? That lump is still there. And I carried that lump in my throat and in my stomach and in my mental, all of it. I carried it everywhere. So it gets very heavy and I wanted to put it down. So I don't know if it was a natural thing or if I got a resource, I just felt like I am better than this. This is not my life. And I feel, and I say this almost every day, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So I decided to make small changes. My first change I made was my mindset. I kept challenging those negative thoughts. The second change I made an appointment with myself every day to journal for 10 minutes. The next 10 minutes was personal development. And what that looks like for me is picking up a self-help book, listening to a podcast, being inspired by someone who is inspiring, who you want to like image, right? And so I would listen to, Brene Brown, Mel Robbins, even back in the day, right? This is many years ago. John Maxwell, so many, Tony Robbins, so many people that are very inspirational. And either it was through their book or through listening to them on YouTube or whatever. But I would only do it 10 minutes a day. And the reason for being is I have ADHD and OCD, and after 10 minutes, my mind is going crazy with other things I have to be doing. And so I allow that 10 minutes a day, and then I process it. I pick out the golden nugget within that 10 minutes, and I put it to work. See, what's really cool about this is you can read a book, you can listen to a podcast, you can go get coaching, but if you're not willing to put the actions behind the thoughts, your results are the same. So I'm a big believer in being able to create the action to get the results in which I want. I wanted a better life, and I had to start advocating and prioritizing myself.
Amazing. Honestly, so many things came out of that I'm just like, I need to ask about that. But what really stuck with me at the start of that was when you said I was imprisoned in my mind before I went through those incarceration doors. But then, you've given this wonderful sort of step-by-step process of the things that really helped shift your mindset. And we return again to the actions. Actions are so key. So really thank you for sort of hammering that point home, because I think so many listeners will benefit from that. So thank you.
Of course, yes.
And I want to know then, what happened when you started to release that shame and you started taking steps forward? How did you find things started to change in your life?
I took on a better attitude about running into someone who I hadn't seen yet. I took on a better attitude of my employment. Prior to the incarceration, I always made really good money. I had started my own company, made good money there. And some of your audience may be listening, well, if you made good money, why were you embezzling money? When I was isolating, I wasn't in my office. And if you don't do the work, you get the result, right? So for many months, almost 7-8 months, I did nothing in my office. So everything just stopped. The money stopped. Everything just stopped. And the idea, the way out was to go ahead and just write my checks to my company and get it going afloat. And when I got caught, I had already returned half the money. But it was my attitude. It was my mindset about it. I'm okay with running into Susie down the street who has yet to come and say hello, or is it going to be awkward? Is it not going to be awkward? I was okay with who I was, and no one could shame me. If I felt shame, it was on me. And then I would stop and take a look at it. Why did I feel shame running into Susie? Or why was I embarrassed to say, oh, I've been gone for 20 months? And I was okay with it. Now, just to be real, I also felt like it's none of anybody's business. If they haven't seen me or reached out to me in 2 years, is it my business or is it theirs? It's none of my business what other people think of me. It's not.
Yes.
And once you can let that go, it's very freeing.
Yeah. And you can actually hear that in your voice, that freedom that comes with that sort of self-acceptance, this kind of owning your worth and knowing, look, you're right, it's on them. Whatever they believe about me, it's on them. It's not about me. So I think that's another really useful and helpful point for listeners. And what would you say has led you into the work that you do today?
I look back and I like, where did it all start? And it started with infidelity in my marriage. I thought I had a beautiful, perfect marriage, but behind closed doors, every 6 months we went through this. I'm out all night. He's out all night. He's coming home smelling like perfume. He's just cheating. He's out cheating. And I had to look at where that came from, what role I played, if I played a role.
Yes.
I looked at all of that stuff. And I went through years of counseling and therapy because your self-esteem, your self-value, your confidence is, excuse me, your own self-image.
That's right.
All of that is literally, you doubt it. You start having that self-doubt. And so when I started looking at that, I looked at, again, my pivotal moment of how did I end up here? How did I get to where I am? And I just traced the steps. And so the work that I do for divorced women is about that emotional healing. I am a big believer in protecting your well-being. And people go, oh, that's nice. But my definition of well-being starts with your mental well-being. Your emotional well-being is next. Your physical well-being is third. And of course, your spiritual well-being, if it suits you. And if you are that spiritual, some women, some of my clients have switched that, where it's their spiritual well-being first, and then it goes down. And that's totally fine. It doesn't matter the order. It is your responsibility to protect your well-being. And so I learned to set up boundaries. I learned to gain the confidence in which I needed to continue setting the example for my daughter, setting the example for my family, being able to advocate for myself on the things that I needed. If I needed space, or if I needed alone time, or if I needed a support, I was able to advocate. It is crazy that when you start working on you and pour the energy into you first, then you can pour so lovingly to others. You know the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. It is so true. It is so true. When you don't pour from a full cup, you become hasty, you become snippy in your tone, you become cranky, you become irritated quickly. It's just all the things. It's like, hurry, 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 demand, demand, demand. You know, it's that powerful force of, and so when your cup is full, you are patient, you're kind, you're generous, you're loving, you're giving, you're everything. And that is, I want to be the better person to support my daughter and her family and my friends, as opposed to the short-tempered person. There's a big difference, right?
So true. And I really love what you said about it being our responsibility to take care of our own well-being, and really kind of looking inwards and taking some agency. We have the strength within us to do these things. So it's great to hear that. And I'm sure you've made a difference for so many women that you've helped along the way. And I guess actually I want to kind of circle back, because we started the conversation as well, talking a little bit about Jeff and how everybody needs a Jeff in their life. Talk to me about finding love again and what that was like for you.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the things that I get beyond thrilled about talking about, because, excuse me, you go from the lack of confidence and the self-doubt, and remember the lack of self-body image and things like that. And you go, I'm never going to find anyone, or I'm going to find the same toxic trait in another person. And so if nothing changes, nothing changes. So how do you change? How do you break that cycle of dating the same person? And you have to really start with yourself, because what we do in life is we teach people how we want to be treated. And because I didn't have the confidence to say, you know what, you're going to step out of this relationship, I'm going to leave this relationship. And I didn't. I just went, oh, he would apologize. I would accept it. And so I had to build trust. I had to build trust in myself first. And people are like, how do you build trust after being cheated on for so many years? It starts with me. I want to be able to trust my decisions. And I started really small, like trusting the food I was ordering, or trusting the outfit I was wearing, or trusting the way I answered a question, or trusting running into someone without being overwhelmed. Just learning to take baby steps on trust yourself, then being able to trust others. Now, what trust means, in my opinion, and if you listen to my podcast, you're going to know that I say actions and words have to not only align, but they have to be consistent. Consistently aligning, actions and words consistently aligning builds a beautiful foundation of trust. And my girlfriends and I were sitting around the coffee table having happy hour, and one said, you need to get online and start finding someone. I said, I don't know if I want to do that yet. And I said, once I lose 30 pounds. And they said, no, you're doing it now. And I thought, you know what? That's right. If I find someone that loves me for who I am today, then I've scored. And then he's scored, because once I lose the weight, you know what I mean? I'm going to just be hot. But I did that. And what's interesting is when I saw Jeff, he wasn't what I normally dated, you know, and he's like, you know, he works in IT. And so he's like that nerd, but he's like that sexy nerd. I just look at him and go, he's just delicious. But he started our relationship with trust. He said, I'm going to call you Tuesday at 5. And at 5 o'clock on Tuesday, my phone rang. I'm going to pick you up Friday at 6:30. At 6:30, ding dong. He started that foundation of trust, and it made me feel confident. It allowed me to trust. It allowed me to break down my barriers. And I started being smitten by him. And I'm going to tell you something, Connie, I'm not going to lie here. 3 weeks into this relationship, I knew I had to say something, because I could feel it in my heart. I could feel it in my whole well-being, all of them, my whole well-being. This man is amazing. And I want him for myself. I want to take him off the market. I want him, right? And so I had to have a heart-to-heart talk with him. And I just basically said, hey, can we talk Friday before our date? Or, you know, and I kind of left it open-ended, because if it didn't go well, they probably weren't going to go on the date. But if it went well, we were going to go on the date. So the conversation just simply started with, listen, I need to share something with you. And it's going to start with me first. And then I would love for your input, or giving you space to process. But I broke it down to him. I did something that I took something that didn't belong to me, and I was punished for it. And I was incarcerated. And he's like, oh, you know, and he's very kind. He's very generous. He's very soft-spoken. And he says, but that's not you today, is it? I'm like, no, it's not. It's not me today. I didn't do anything before. I haven't done anything since. No, it's not me today. He goes, then we'll get through it. And I'm like, okay, that was too quick. That was too quick of a re-answer. So I'm like, wait a minute. You need to understand that if we become a partner together, if we become in relationship, then it can affect our future. And he's like, well, how? And I broke that down. It affects my credit. It affects my employment. It affects, voting right. I mean, all the things. As a felon, you have a stigma on you, and all the things. And he goes, but if we're in it together, we can do this. Bawling, just bawled. I just cried. I literally just cried. Oh my gosh. Yeah, he's amazing.
It should be a movie.
I think it should. It's just, and like I said, one of the things I didn't want to do, I didn't want to take for granted, because he is such a good guy. if he wasn't going to be with me, then I wanted to give him the opportunity to say, listen, if it's not with me, that's totally fine. You're amazing. You're such a great guy. That woman is going to be so lucky to have you. And he's like, I'm not going anywhere. You think I'm going? I'm not going anywhere. And I'm like, okay. And from there, we were inseparable. I know, right? 10 years strong.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. You and Jeff, I'm so happy for you both.
Thank
Honestly, I think that's just a beautiful love story.
Yeah.
And I think it just goes to show, you talked earlier about sweeping things under the carpet. What a difference it makes to be open and vulnerable. And clearly this is the right person as well, that they can say, we're in this together, and wow.
Yeah. I didn't want to repeat. You know what I mean? I mean, listen, you get on those apps, the dating apps, and you can get so crazily boggled with the swiping and the this and the small chat and all this stuff. But I knew what I was looking for. I knew what I didn't want. And so when I help women find love in the modern dating, it's also one of those things that you got to know what you want. Because if you don't know what you want, then you can start with the list of what I don't want. But our list changed. Remember back in high school when we used to write, oh, he's got to be 6'2", he has to drive a Ferrari, he has to live in, have a home in Italy and in Arizona, all these things, right? This is high school. We don't know these things. But our lists start to change. My list was, I want him to be trustworthy. I want him to have a sense of humor. I want him to be gainfully employed. So that meant stable. What does that mean, gainfully employed? That means that he's going to be stable. Does he have to own a home? No. Does he have to drive a fast car? No. But did he? Yes. But you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Your lists start to change. And so if you notice what I didn't do on my new list, I didn't put his physical attributes. I didn't say that he had to be 5'11". I didn't say he had to be blue-eyed and fair skin. I didn't say any of that, because the person that he is the whole package. And I just love him for the inside first. And of course, it is icing on the cake that he is sexy on the outside too. But my point being is that you need to know what you want and how you want to feel with that partner in your life.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think also it speaks volumes when you can be your true self as well. You're not going into it pretending to be someone else. Also not going to last either. So that is just lovely.
Yeah. You don't want to go in trying to just all the false things that we do. I mean, listen, I do them too. I'm not saying that you can't do it, but when you come in with weaves and false lashes and false nails and fake boobs, all the physical attributes, I mean, just if that's what you do, okay, great. I love that. I do some of it too. But authentically coming in with just authentically you. And here is, I think, a real big kicker. If you don't know who you are, how do you expect someone else to know who you are? You don't. You've got to be authentic to you. Start dating you first. That's always the first thing I say. Girl, if you want to find a man that has such a great dynamic in your personality, start dating you first. When was the last time you took you on a date? Literally you on a date. I took myself on a date literally 2 months prior to meeting Jeff. I went and had a beautiful happy hour sitting at a table by myself. I ordered, some appetizers. Then I went to a movie, watched a movie by myself, got popcorn, and I walked out going, girl, you got this. Like, it's a little awkward, but you know what? It doesn't have to be so dramatic. Let go of the drama. Just be authentic you. Go take a tango class. Go take a line dancing class. Go do something for you and start dating you. Start treating you like you want to be treated, because it builds confidence. It builds self-esteem. It also allows you to become aware of who you are and what you're all about. I love that. Love that.
Oh my gosh. You're hitting us with all these wise words.
Yeah.
Speaking truths, I just think, honestly, so many people will need to listen to this again because there's so much to take away from your story, from the things that you've learned, the lessons that you're giving to other people. And I think, I guess, to try and bring this all in together, if you then had to summarize for someone who is maybe going through the same thing that you went through, whether they're going through divorce, whether they've been incarcerated, and they're feeling stuck in this situation right now, what's that one step that they could take that can help them?
I'm going to go back to prioritizing yourself.
Yeah.
Prioritize you. Make you just as important as everything else on your calendar. It's like, we never miss a hair salon appointment, do we? We will never miss a hair salon appointment. That's who we are as women, right?
Yes.
Put something on the calendar that makes you feel good and stick to it every single day. I don't care if it's journaling. I don't care if it's personal development. I don't care if it's working out. You have to prioritize you. It's about you. It's about your healing. If you're feeling stuck, start taking the time to deal with it, to deal with the emotions. I feel like you have to feel all the feels. If you're in a divorce situation, you have to feel all the emotions. Divorce is messy. It's ugly. It's sticky. It's confusing. It's crazy. It's a whirlwind and a storm all at the same time. It's like the perfect storm. You have to deal with those emotions. If you're feeling sad, feel sad. Don't sweep it under the carpet. The longer it takes. So it's so crazy. I'm going to share this with you. You've heard the saying, time heals all, right? You've heard that saying, oh, time will heal all. You're right. It does take time to heal, but it's what you're doing in that time that can cut that healing process in half. I have met women in my line of work that have been suffering with emotional healing for 20 years, 30 years, because they've never dealt with those emotions. Once you prioritize yourself, and you can take one emotion and deal with it for the whole week if you want to. I don't care how you do it. I just want you to know that once you prioritize yourself and spend the energy that we do on everybody else, your life will change. Your priorities will become important. Your space will become important. And you'll start identifying with yourself like, wow, I really do enjoy this, or I really don't like that. And you'll start recognizing the things that you are doing are for yourself. And that will come back to you 100 times fold, right? Because again, you become a better person. And when you become that better person, you're giving better. And I love the full circle effect. It's so beautiful and it's so inspiring that I just want to keep giving. So the first question you asked me is my first chapter in my life book. And the first draft was all about me. It's like me, 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 me. Then I paused and I went, this is not what I want. I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about them. What do they need immediately for emotional healing? And I gave them some tools. Then my story starts in chapter 2. Because again, it's my full circle, right? It's my full circle.
Yes. Oh, Nichole, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, I just love how we've kind of tied off that story there by going back to the beginning and just remembering it's about serving others and just hearing about how you have just been on this journey of self-discovery and now helping other women who've been in similar situations. I really want to thank you. And I always
end. Having me.
You're welcome. You're more than welcome. I have one more question to ask you, because I'm all about sort of speaking to remarkable women, and obviously you are one of them. And I want to know if you had to name one remarkable woman who's inspired you, who would it be and why?
I think through my journey, it would be Oprah. And why is because she was in my sight. What I mean by that is she was on TV every day. And whether it was her commercial, her smile, her guest, her own story, she was in my sight. And I became to start listening to her. And she's inspired me to think outside the box, not just your traditional way of correlating things to thoughts and stuff like that, just to really think outside the box and put in some great thought-provoking questions. It's like, I wonder if I would do that, or could I do that, or should I do that, or watch me do that. You know what I mean? So I was inspired by Oprah, probably very young. And when she had her book club, I would follow along with the book club that allowed me to just live. A book is a story. Her book club is stories of inspiration and strength. And, it's like, if she can do it, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, then I can do it. And so I would say Oprah because she was in sight. Now, I also know too, and this sounds kind of weird, we didn't really touch bases on this, so I'm going to briefly do this. I did not want to be my mom. Still fights chronic depression daily. I didn't want to be that. And so unconsciously and subconsciously and consciously, all the consciouses, I made a choice not to be her. And so when I dealt with my depression, incarcerated journey, I kept going and seeing her in sight, daily sleep, sleeping 22 hours a day, barely eating. And she still lives this way today because she has not dealt with her emotional pain as a child and she refuses to. And that's her choice. And I have to let it go. I have to let that be. So I had two. One to inspire me and motivate me, and one to go, this is what I don't want, so I need to be inspired and motivated.
Oh, thank you for sharing. And I can completely understand as well that both can be kind of driving factors into this is who I want to be. So thank you for sharing those. And I think probably listening to this today, so many people are going to be like, I want to work with Nichole. How do people find you? Where can people listen to your podcast? Tell me all the things.
Yes. So anywhere you download your podcast, it's the Nichole Banks Podcast. I do spell my name with an H. You can visit me on my website, nicholebanks.com. If you're struggling to find the love of your life, I have a beautiful quiz on my website. Are you ready to find love again? It's less than 2 minutes. You get personalized results, and it'll give you an opportunity for some awareness, self-awareness.
Brilliant. And I'm going to put all of that in the show notes. So don't worry if you've not written all of that down. And I just want to end with a huge thank you. And I'm sure all of the listeners who've listened to this podcast today will want to thank you as well. I really appreciate the time that you've given today. And maybe we'll bring back in the future because I think it was just wonderful to speak to you.
Well, thank you. Listen, Connie, the work that you're doing is amazing and it inspires me. And I when you asked me that question, I'm like, oh, it's you. Hello. But the reality is like you weren't there with my journey. So I really needed to kind of go back a little bit. But thank you so much. It's always with a grateful heart. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Speak Shame with Dr. Connie Kerali. And thank you so much to Nichole Banks for being my guest on this week's show. Please take a look at the show notes for information on Nichole's podcast and her other resources. If you'd like to join the community, head over to Dr. Connie Kerali on Instagram or Speak Shame on Facebook and Instagram. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast